Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to my podcast. It's called It's Good to Talk, and it sure is good to talk. I always have an interesting guest on, and today is no exception. I will be introducing my guest in a few minutes after I do some promos. My sponsors are Liffey Van Lines, a moving company here in New York City, and they have been around longer than Jeopardy. And I will come back to Jeopardy in a moment as well, because I have an important guest coming on my show from Jeopardy. I also give a shout out to the Irish Examiner USA. It's a great Irish American newspaper here in New York City. It's my second diary. It keeps me in line for events that are coming up and on the way. And it's a busy season with all kinds of events, Irish and news from across the pond too. If any of you remember Austin Rogers, he was a Jeopardy contestant on Jeopardy. He will be a guest on It's Good to Talk in a few weeks' time. But today my guest is Walter Brewer, and I want to talk to Walter Brewer. I don't know too much about his story, but everybody has a story, and words are important. Walter, good morning, and welcome to It's Good to Talk. Tell me, and tell my listeners, where were you born? What do you do, and what's your talent?
Good morning, John. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Good.
I am from Tucson, Arizona. I recently made my way out to the East Coast like 5 years ago, so not too recent now, but still feels like yesterday.
Okay.
And I'm a technology recruiter. It's in staffing and recruitment. It's an industry I did not know anything about until I moved out here. All the way through college, never really knew it existed, and kind of fell myself in there by accident, and not looking back anytime soon.
Okay, that's interesting because I don't know too much about IT recruitment either. I grew up in Ireland in the 80s, and all I know is there was a shortage of programmers and IT guys. Everyone from Hewlett Packard, uh, Dell, I guess, then Google arrived, and we have more technology in Ireland probably than any other part of the EU, the European community. Well, thanks to the talent of the Irish students at the time, because we had a massive amount of talent and students, and they were ready to go in and become programmers. Tell me more about your career. Where did you go? What did you study first when you started studying, and where?
I started studying economics at University of Southern California, and I ended up not really using my major, but learned the foundations of supply and demand and how they kind of go into the market, help people find new jobs at certain timings. And timing, I've learned, is everything.
Yes.
When it's good for the hiring, when it's good for the candidates, when it's good for the market, when things come together, that's
Mm-hmm.
when positions are able to be filled. But there's a lot of standstill. Can be some pushback in the market, in this industry,
Mm-hmm.
as it's pretty selective and competitive, as you know.
Okay.
So it makes it a little bit, for lack of better words, intense.
Yeah. Okay. Intense is right. So at the moment, like in your industry, like I assume we're talking about what we're talking about wherever people come from. Is there enough uh, people with skills in IT, or have we a shortage of people with skills with IT?
For the exact skill set that companies are looking for today, there's a major shortage.
Okay.
There are more open job descriptions and job requisites than there are the amount of candidates that actually do each skill set, which
Okay.
creates a
Okay.
problem.
Okay. I like the way you answer that question because that leads me on to another question. Of course, is like let's talk about the skill set. Like when someone like me that's like my background is marketing, economics, and all that, and I do know about supply and demand. I do know the basics of it. I know a lot about a lot of things, but not everything about everything. So when it comes to IT, are you looking for programmers or just people with good mathematical skills that can learn, as we say in Ireland, on the hoof? Like you fall into a job and you are shown around and you could learn it in a week.
Yeah, pretty loaded question. There's a few sides of IT that have become very prevalently dominant over the last few years. But with that said, the skill set's everything. So trying to hire somebody who tells you that they can learn the job next week, or they've done something similar, or they've learned a similar skill set, doesn't really cut it these days. There's so many things that our candidates are being sized up on now, and if you don't have the exact experience from your most recent job for a few significant of years, um, amount of years, then it's not going to happen with
Okay.
today's competitive market. There's just
Okay.
always somebody who wants that shot.
Well, thank you for your honesty on that. That's important. I mean, it's not like I have a restaurant background myself, and I know there's a different variety of chefs, and you just can't create a sushi chef from a greasy spoon chef. It's not. As you said, it's not going to cut it. Pardon the pun when it comes to cutting sushi. But no, there's different skills and talents. But let's work a little bit more with the IT guy then. What would be a good resume for you to look over, say, for somebody that wants to get into the industry? And I'll ask you another loaded question. Does age matter? Like an old guy like me, or are you looking for the 22-year-old?
Yeah, you make a very strong point. I had a boss from a couple of years ago who really harped on the point of the computer science background
Okay,
for the IT candidate. And
right.
now it's pretty standard common knowledge as a recruiter. But coming in, sometimes you want to give people chances and get the wheels in motion and get things going as a hungry career go-getter. But as a boss once told me, do you really want your doctor or the architect who built your home or your apartment to not be a trained, licensed professional in the industry with a degree in that background? Or do you just want somebody who's kind of to become your dentist who's coming from a chef background?
Yeah,
They're pretty precarious things that we do with our lives, like dentistry and doctors, and we
yeah.
need the best of the best, people who come from these backgrounds. So now hiring people only who come from computer science backgrounds is a must. It's
Right. Well, that's a good answer to say the least. I mean, like a guy like an airline pilot, say for example, quoting yourself somewhat, who's flying an airplane. I don't think he's qualified to be the president of the United States. He might be a good pilot, but that's what he knows, and he might do a kamikaze on us when it comes to flying a plane. So what you're saying basically is the qualifications that the guys that you're looking at recruiting are important, and you avoided the question about age. Like a 8-year-old, a 6-year-old that says, "Okay, I know everything," but let's say his wheels aren't rolling, okay? Because you mentioned wheels rolling. Let's say he's 78 years old and he tells you he has A plus in mathematics, and let's say he knows how to open a computer like you and I do, just about. So is the age thing an issue?
in today's market, in this recruiting world where companies are paying staffing and recruiting companies, usually the benchmark is like 25 to 30% of the candidates that's getting hired. Their annual salary goes to the staffing and recruiting company. They're paying a fee for the future and the likelihood of this person to
Okay,
excel. So to answer your question, there is a little bit of ageism in the industry
right,
because you're hiring on career trajectory, what they've done
right,
in the past, and what they can
right.
bring to the table. So sometimes there's a little bit less success than getting out your 22 to 25-year-old young guns who just graduated with a computer science
Okay,
degree, and she or he is coming
right,
from Squarespace. It's just a
right,
little different. As people age, they sometimes they fall into the consulting trap and get away from the W-2 life and
right,
can become a little bit more hoppy from
right. Okay,
job to job, and
okay,
that's one of the major red flags is not being at each job for a significant amount of time.
okay. Well, that reminds me back to Ireland again. Like say when Intel moved into Ireland, they moved in like for the long term, and I don't mean 5 years, I don't mean 10 years. They were projecting, as you say, for at least 25 years and longer. So that goes with the land purchase they bought to develop their square footage in terms of what they want to build. And as you said too, investing in staff is for the long term. And staff need to be happy in any company. And I'll give a shout out to one of my favorite products, Guinness. Guinness has been noted to be the kindest, best business organization to their staff. Back in the 1800s, Guinness were paying staff health insurance, benefits, vacation time, the best of the best of the best, because Guinness wanted to keep good people with them all the time. You mentioned the word there, happy, and I know what you mean by happy. That means when you jump from one job to another job to another job to another job to another job, and there, if we wanted to bring it into an American phrase, they could also be called drifters, but drifters might be a little bit more derogative than happy. There's nothing wrong with diversification. There's nothing wrong with being in a career or changing a career. I mean, look at me. I'm a podcaster. 3 years ago, I wasn't a podcaster, okay? I wrote a book. The book then led me on to become a podcaster because during COVID, Corona time, and I don't want to be using that as a bit of an excuse. Corona brought a lot of good things, or the coronavirus brought a lot of good things. I mean, at least we got the subways and the underground washed and cleaned up in New York City. That's only one thing. But let's get back to you, Walter. Like you said, you were educated in California and your economic background and so on and so forth. And then, like you yourself, how did you switch then from that qualification to where you are now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always thought that economics would lead me into some finance or investment banking kind of career. And when that didn't really happen, with all the requirements and kind of tracking that needs to happen before you land an investment banking job, like the internships, the summer gigs that you're working with specific companies that usually lead to a summer analyst position. When that didn't happen, I kind of had to start doing some research about what is my degree, what are my skill sets, and how can I portray this into a career and get the wheels in motion right away. So it took some time, but over time, I kind of ruled what does work and what doesn't work, being realistic. It didn't really make that much sense for me to go back to med school and try to become a doctor with like an economics degree.
Okay.
I knew that from like past experience, I didn't really want to like get back into manual labor or hands-on work like I did in the summers working from a couple of my dad's friends in high school. So I found recruiting. And it just seemed like this perfect, like best of both worlds, people, person, still hands-on, and just no day is the same, and kind of fell in love with it after my first interview. I worked for a few different companies in the industry now, and now I'm at a real tight-knit, real close, good like family-like setting shop, and it's really allowing me to grow from what I've learned in the past and kind of
Well, you are young, so you have time to grow, of course. And
yes, hopefully.
you have a long way to go before you catch up on my wheels rolling, or older people than me. I'm not saying I'm old, but I'm not young. So wheels rolling. Where are your wheels rolling to, say, in the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years, I think I would be blessed and honored to be able to still be with my company.
That's good.
We spoke about job hoppiness and being drifters. It's easier said than done to kind of find your place at a new company. And finding that dream job and finally securing it is kind of like the backbone of our society, I've come to learn, where everybody's 9 to 5 just consumes them to the point of before they go to sleep and the first thing on their mind when they wake up, usually Monday through Friday, but it really consumes us. It's a little bit different, I've noticed, than in the EU and the UK, where people are a little bit less attached to their jobs and kind of let their lifestyle live both parts of their lives and rule it. But here it's kind of everything, and it kind of tells why the competitive markets can be so scattered, so miscombobulated, and sometimes just confusing.
Okay, so what's your best advice to, say, a young man or a young woman, say, in their early 20s, and they get into a job position with a company? Okay, they're not going to land right at the top of the organization right away. But let's assume that they're happy with their pay, they're happy with their benefits, they're happy with their workmates, one would hope. Like, advice then for them to see the bigger picture, or should they become a drifter?
Yeah, let's get to that. John, how many people do you think are happy with their day-to-day, their current job right now in America? I read a stat recently. What do you think it is?
I don't know the answer to your question about what the stat is, but I do know one thing, and this is the advice I could give anybody. If somebody is not happy in their job, definitely they should leave it. If you're not happy at your work, don't be miserable. Don't be miserable. Move on and find something. You are a perfect example. You took your time until you found your ideal career, and now you are happy at what you're doing, and you want to stay with it. To the other guys out there and girls that are bitching every day, they don't like the supervisor, they don't like the boss, they don't like the location. Well, fuck off. Don't stay there. Move
Agreed.
on.
Yeah, you
Okay,
only live once, so why live
you only live
miserably?
once, and work hard, play hard. You know, there's a way to balance like life structures and how to live like as close to normal, a perfect life, or reasonably decent life. You come out, you're born, and then you die, and in between, it's what you do in between that makes you happy, so you can maybe give something back to society as well. So
Agreed.
your advice, maybe you're going to just say you agree with me, but is there any other advice you could give young people other than what I just told them? You don't have to tell them to fuck off, but what would you tell them?
Yeah, so with that stat, it's over 50%. 60% of people are miserable and unhappy in their lives,
Oh
their
God,
current jobs. And that's just a crazy statistic to me.
it is.
And I would hope to be able to do something about it in the future. I
Mm,
think the best advice I can give people maybe early in their college career, getting ready to join the workforce, is be realistic about what you bring to the table, what your degree actually is, or lack of degrees, and
mm.
are you going to be happy in that line
Yes.
of work 10, 15 years down the road? That's what people should ask themselves before I need this job, I need this career to give off the impression X or to make the amount
Right.
of money X. It's really
Mm.
about working with ourselves and
Right.
growth before
Right.
that.
I used to give educational talks in Ireland to high school kids, and they were only like 17, 18, 19 guys and girls. And my advice to them was like you're thinking of doing going in some career, get a summer job that connects with it. So if you think you want to be a nurse or a doctor, okay, let's become a carer for an old patient or an old lady or an old man. And if you can't deal with blood, and if you can't deal with cleaning someone's backside, you're not qualified to be a nurse, and you certainly aren't qualified to be a doctor. If you can't deal with giving someone an injection and you're more fucking afraid of blood than the patient, you need to go and become a car salesman or a different job, okay?
Hmm.
Definitely. Anyways, what else can we talk about before Jimmy's waiting. Yeah, you haven't met Jimmy Grady yet, but you will meet him in a minute. Jimmy's career is already laid out for him. He is a professional singer. He's winning a lot of music and singing competitions. And I can see his career he's going to be a singer because he's already loves to sing. He's going to sing a song, Walter, for you and for I and for my listeners. And the name of the song is Caledonia. It's a Scottish song because Caledonia is the word in Latin for Scotland. And Jimmy sang this at a funeral home 3 months ago, and the people there, they didn't know him, but he sang it so beautifully that people were running out of tissues and crying because the coffin was behind them in the funeral parlor. Critel is the name of the funeral home. Free plug for a funeral home there, and he sang it. And then I met people recently and said, "What was the name of the song? And who was the little boy?" Well, the little boy is 13 years old now, and he has a bright future in front of him. So we'll talk a little bit, and then I'll get Jimmy on, and then I got to come back after you leave me, Walter, because I know you're a busy man too. Talk about some events coming up, and then last time I was on, I was looking to get the European national anthem played out, and AI. I'm sure we'll talk about AI in a second. The AI screwed up. I mean, artificial intelligence screwed up. And then I
Mm.
was like, oh, fuck artificial intelligence. They should have left it artificial insemination. So let's get back. Where does AI come into your job situation?
Yeah, definitely. Two big points with AI and Jimmy the Great. AI has become, since probably COVID days, a large part in how we get our jobs. There's these things called the CRM and the ATS of the backbone of companies for their hiring
Explain those,
processes.
please. Explain those two terms.
Yeah, an ATS is an applicant tracking system,
Okay.
heavily used by internal companies as well as staffing and recruiting companies. And sometimes to save the legwork and kind of create saving time, we are using AI to vet and screen out and filter out
Okay.
the bad resumes before the good resumes before they come in.
So you said AT what again? AT
ATS,
what?
applicant tracking system, kind of the
Applicant tracking system.
yeah,
Okay.
like
How did this? Okay, I like the term. I'm happy with that. How did that fail with George Santos?
wow, that's a good question. I guess that's a great example of how someone slipped through the cracks, and we kind of were just told what to believe about
You're
somebody's
right
background.
there. Mm.
Really slipped through the cracks and kind of became a pillar of society that we all love to hate. Now he's kind of like a villain in our society because of his actions. Um, but that's a good example. You know, he was put into a position of power
Yeah.
and wasn't truly vetted. And maybe AI kind of allowed him to get into there,
Yeah.
allowed him to meet the right people,
Okay.
and weren't really vetted to his education and his
Okay.
actual past background.
Definitely not. So you use another term there. What was the other one you called?
CRM before that?
Yeah. What's that one? Yeah.
Candidate Relationship Manager. The two
Okay.
are very similar, CRM and ATS.
So ATS like tracks the guy uh, all the way back to his high school degree, if any.
Yes, it's kind of like the database where companies put all of their information in,
Right.
and it's kind of like a tracking system. So it's
Right.
like, oh, we've talked to this lady before, and we
Right.
have gathered this much information about her. She's really strong with this, and we'll put
Right.
all of this information into the
Right.
ATS, where if she comes into our repertoire
Right.
again, we already have her tracked.
Mm. Well, I remember one time back in Europe as well. I had to hire an electrician. I didn't know at the time. I didn't know too many electricians, and a brother to electrician said, "My brother is an electrician." I said, "Okay, what did he do?" So he said he wired Disney World in Paris. There was a Disney World or Paris or Disneyland. So I said, if you wired Disney World or Disneyland, that's fucking good enough for me. I only need a bar or restaurant wired. But it turned out the guy was actually a good electrician. But if we had the fast tracking, he only turned on a few light switches in Disneyland, okay? He wasn't really a qualified electrician at Disney World. So I can see where the fast tracking can come in. Or somebody going to an interview and telling lies. And people are good at lying nowadays. Lies are like second nature. And my father brought all my brothers and sisters up. Shame the devil, tell the truth. Lies were completely taboo. So you're saying that your fast tracking system can infiltrate the person who's dishonest.
I think those things exist because of how much people lie. And what you're alluding to is people will kind of put on a show or a story to tell you what they want to hear to get this career or job. And it happens so often today. And I had a tough time learning that in the beginning, always giving people the benefit of the doubt. But people will lie on the interview or on that
Mm,
phone call with a recruiter to land
mm,
that interview, to justify the means to an end. So it's
mm.
a real thing, indeed.
Yeah. And I guess the important thing, Walter, is like once you're aware of it, if you're aware of it, you can kind of look out for it. And like you strike me as an honest young man. You know, you have that persona about you. Okay, now I don't know you all that well. Maybe you're Jack the Ripper. I don't know, but you're you obviously smile, so I don't think you're Jack the Ripper. But you know my point there. Like somebody can come across so nice, so honest, and then all of a sudden there's a deep, dark side to them. You know.
Yeah, and these are pretty, people are creatures of habit, and you kind of look for the signs when people start to lie, how descriptive they get, how much detail they add, the body language they use.
Mm.
You kind of see these repeating patterns, and when you see someone blatantly lying about working with every technology under the sun, and
Mm.
yes, I'm perfect for the job, send me out to your client.
Yeah.
Like, all right, this person just yesed me to death.
Mm.
Maybe we should hold back a second and
Mm.
reevaluate this person,
Okay. Okay.
what they're saying, and maybe have them really spell it out to us what they do day to day.
So let's let's expand it to a little psychology. What if that person is like a pathological liar that they have convinced themselves that they're telling the truth? So
Those are
convincing. Go
those
ahead.
are harder. Those are harder to pick up on. Those kind of people,
Mm.
for lack of better words, believing their
Yeah.
own lies,
Yeah.
justifying to the means to the end, and ultimately that person will make you look bad in business when
Oh
you,
wow.
Put your name on that,
Oh
get
wow.
a
Yeah.
seal of approval, send them out to your client
Oh
who
wow. Yeah.
pays you big bucks in the past for this, and does make you look pretty silly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an
Okay.
unfortunate part of it, but it's something you got to
You,
look out for.
well, you seem to be well aware of the pitfalls and what it is that you're qualified at and you're good at. Do you want to add anything else before I? Jimmy, get ready. I'll finish the bloody ice cream. Okay, he's having a softie.
I'm
Ice cream.
excited. I'm excited to meet Jimmy. But yeah, to Jimmy's point, I think that when you find your trade or your craft, you got to stick with it, and just when you find out what it is that's going to make you happy in your 9 to 5, day to
Right,
day, you
right.
stick with it and you just don't turn back and you make it happen no matter what,
And,
because
and,
that's
and, and be happy at work.
that when you find what does make you tick and be happy at work,
Yeah.
stay there, keep going. It's
Well,
hard to find.
like up at Liffey, where I do like consultant for them, we always say, you're allowed to smile. It's it helps increase your face value. It makes your customers feel happy. And if someone is listening to this and you're on a bus or a subway today or wherever, and you see someone that doesn't have a smile, if you give them a smile, you'll get a smile back, and it's free.
Smile
Okay,
goes a long way.
good. Walter, I'm going to say thank you very much for being my guest today. Very interesting young man, and I wish you well going forward with your own career and the people that you are recruiting. Do you want to put up any information for people to contact you if they're looking to be hired, or will they just email me to get you?
That the latter sounds great to me. I can share my
Okay,
email, but yeah, I'm pretty somebody you can reach all the time, just for career advice or anything. I'd be happy to talk,
that's good.
industry
Okay,
or not. Always here.
that's, you're very generous with your information too. So anybody that's looking for a career in IT or general advice, maybe from Walter, you can email me jhfornews@yahoo.com. And if you like this podcast, subscribe. It's free to subscribe, and I need subscribers. Jimmy, ready? He's going to sing the song Caledonia, and I'm going to say goodbye to you. And then I come back for the second part of this podcast to talk about European elections and maybe why people want to become members of parliament, candidates for politics. So,
Very
Walter,
interesting.
goodbye for now.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure.
Oh, the little boats are gone from the breast of Liffey. The ferrymen are stranded on the quay. Sure, the Dublin docks are dying and the way of life is gone. And Molly, it was part of you and me. Where the strawberry bed swept down to the Liffey, you kissed away the worries from my brow. I love you well today, and I love you more tomorrow. If you ever love me, Molly, love me now. Sure, the Liffey ferry made a man of me. Now it's gone without a whisper, half forgotten even now. And it's over, Molly, over, can't you see? Where the strawberry bed sweep down to the Liffey, you kissed away the worries from my brow. I love you well today, and I love you more tomorrow. If you ever love me, Molly, love me now. Now I'll tend the garden too, and I'll spend my days in talking. Hear them whisper, Charlie's on the dole. Now, Molly, we're still living, and darling, we're still young, but the river never owned my heart and soul. Where the strawberry bed sweep down to the Liffey, you kissed away the worries from my brow. I love you well today, and I love you more tomorrow. If you ever love me, Molly, love me now. If you ever love me, Molly, love me now.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy, for doing that. And thank you, Walter Brewer, for giving us an insight into IT recruitment. Very informative, very smart guy. If you need to contact him, you have my email. I'll refer him on to you. So now let me pick up on the second part of this podcast. Some shout-outs to do, and then I'll briefly mention about the European elections coming up. Firstly, I want to talk about an event I have coming up. It's at 276 Ryder Avenue in Mott Haven in the Bronx. It's an art gallery, art show. It'll go on from May the 11th all the way to May the 18th. So there's 2 weekends there if you're working during the week. I will be displaying art from local artists, and especially from my good friend that passed away, Nancy Purnell. Her family kindly donated a lot of her art, which proceeds will go to the Ronald McDonald House for kids with cancer here in Manhattan. Very worthy cause that I have sponsored before. And there are other artists that will be displaying, exhibiting on the day. And if you know an artist or have a friend that's an artist and they would like to display and exhibit, they can contact me again, jhfornews@yahoo.com. jhfornews@yahoo.com. I do have sponsors: LTB Mechanical, United Print Group, Elite Healers, Liffey Van Lines, of course, Big Apple Mini Storage, to same but a few. So at the event from the 11th of May to the 18th of May at Ryder Avenue, I'll just show you this little flyer here. And it's on the top floor. You get there by elevator, will bring you up to the top of the house. It's also promoted by the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, ilovethebronx.com. At the event as well, we'll have lots of activities for young children, table tennis, ping ball, dartboard, cards, if you like playing 25 or Texas Hold'em, some board games, some challenges with jigsaws and stuff, a lot of interesting stuff, and some refreshments. If more information, contact me at JH4News. Other events coming up is the Cinque de Mayo. It's actually an Irish event, and that's coming up May 4th. And that's where Mayo travels to Chicago for some festivities. More Mayo all the way. Mayo are doing well in the football again this year. And the All-Ireland football will be July 24th. And going back to one of my previous podcasts, I had Michael D. McAndrew on here. He'll come back on to give us his projections, how the final will go. Will it be Mayo and Galway? Well, Mayo and Galway will be coming up soon. Or will it be Mayo and Donegal? Will it be Mayo and Dublin? Or will it be Mayo and Kerry? Who knows? So that's coming up. The Bronx Ball is coming up on May 18th. And that's from the Bronx Chamber of Commerce. Shout out to Robert Walsh and Vanessa Gibbons, who is the Bronx Borough President. She's certainly lined up possibly to be the next mayor of New York. Well qualified, more than qualified. Shout out to the IBO. I was at their meeting this morning, and they have a lot of events coming up too, and they're worth looking at and maybe joining. Membership is reasonable to join. Connections are good, and networking is good. They have at least four networking events per month. Something there for everybody, really and truly. I did already mention too that Jeopardy Austin Rogers will be a guest on my show in a few weeks. And I'm bringing back my historian guy, Brian Layden, to delve a bit more into the elections that are coming up in Europe on June 6th and 7th. The MEPs, which means members of the European Parliament. All of these countries have to select members of the European Parliament. On a previous podcast, I explained how Northern Ireland will not be entitled to vote in the European elections because they are part of England and the UK left Europe. And when they left Europe, they forgot, well, they didn't forget, maybe they forgot, that Northern Ireland is part of England. So it's very unfair, I think, in my opinion, that Northern Ireland people cannot have a vote in the European elections. And I'll come to another example of that in a moment. I'll come to it right now. Friends of mine asked me about comparing. They're going to Puerto Rico on vacation, and Puerto Rico is a hot tourist attraction spot, and they wanted to know some of the similarities between Ireland and Puerto Rico. Well, okay, Puerto Rico's population is about 3.6 million, I think, give or take, and their population is decreasing. Now that's a concern for Puerto Rico. Now, if you're from Leitrim and you go to Puerto Rico, you will find it interesting to see that they too have a lot of potholes in the road. Potholes in the road? Well, some of the roads are dirt roads, some of the roads are good roads, but you'll get used to potholes. The weather, a lot of hurricanes, a lot of tornadoes. And if you remember when Donald Trump and the First Lady were there in October 2017, he was just newly elected president, and both the president and his wife, they looked stunning, they looked gorgeous. And they went to Puerto Rico on the advice of someone in the White House in aid, probably someone that was left over from previous administration, said it would be a good thing to do. They're having floods down there and issues. And Donald Trump thought, is Puerto Rico part of America? Yes, Puerto Rico is part of America, okay? A long history indeed. But what Puerto Rico and Northern Ireland, the unions, have in common is they cannot vote for an American president. Did you know that? So Donald Trump was down there. You can Google this. It's on Google. Donald and his wife looked amazing. Handsome man, beautiful woman. He's throwing out kitchen towels and toilet paper. And then someone told him, Mr. President, Mr. Trump, you know that Puerto Rico cannot vote in an American election for a president. Well, Trump almost shit himself. He said, why am I fucking here? You know, he thought it was like a vote thing. But anyways, Puerto Rico cannot vote in an American election. So no votes for Sleepy Joe and no votes for Don the Con, okay? So Puerto Rico, it's just the way the system is. I think Puerto Rico should have a vote, and I think Northern Ireland should have a vote in the European elections. Anyways, back to the election itself. The Irish elections, June 6th, I can be fact-checking that. And also in Ireland, we will have local elections. That means the smaller local in your community, for people that you should know. If you don't know, there's something definitely wrong with the candidate that's running for election. And some of the candidates all over the country will be running, and it's a stepping stone into politics. Brian Layden will be here, as I told you. Brian is a writer, a historian, and we will go into more detail on the candidates that will be representing Ireland. I think we have 14 candidates, which is substantial enough to represent Ireland in Europe, because we are really big part of, for a small country, we're a big part of Europe. And Europe, we need Europe, and Europe needs us. We're the stepping stone for a USA into the European market. Huge, huge, huge. So the local elections, one that comes to mind is Brendan Cahill Flynn. He is probably the youngest candidate in all of Ireland. And it's his first time out running. He's running with the Green Party, and he has his manifesto out. I'll give that a mention before the election again. I read his brochure, his manifesto, very impressed with his projections as a young guy. He's probably only 20 years old, or maybe 21, whatever. And he's the youngest. And then other candidates all over the country are running too. MEPs are obviously, as I said, from the south of Ireland, and they're represented in areas of Dublin, Connacht, and Leinster. And we are allowed 14 of those guys. And well, I wish them all well. And they all get to go and sit in the European Parliament under maybe different, bigger maps of their political viewpoints, like if they're liberal or democratic or conservative or green or case may be. So those are some of the things coming up. So when Brian Layden will be on, if you have any questions for Brian, like email me now. He'll be on in a couple of weeks, and I can put them to Brian on the podcast or before the podcast, so we have some knowledge for you about the elections. And then, of course, the results will be exciting. And going into the rest of the year, like May, June, July, and that, there's a lot of other stuff happening in the world of politics and so on and so forth. My predictions were in January and last January was that inflation would come down. Inflation is down to around 3%. The price of a barrel of oil is down to about $85 a barrel. That's a long way down from the $100 a barrel. And oil, I predict, will come down more, especially if we get some peace in the Middle East, make things a little smoother. The price of oil, I will predict now, will come from 86 down to probably $75 a barrel, okay? And it will go on that trend lower and lower and lower and lower, which also in turn will bring down inflation, okay? And those are good trends, okay? Just like Walter Brewer said there, he studied economics too, supply and demand. So supply and demand are the basics of economics, okay? So I think now I'm going to get my system to sign out on the European National Anthem, which it failed to do the last time. I think that was an AI problem. And I will sign off on my native language today again. It says Song Awalia, Song of Fall, until I see you again. And Shin Scale, which means that's the story. August, Fish Scale, I will have another story for you. So for now, I'm John D. Healy. Podcast is always good to talk. And if you like, do subscribe. I could do with some more subscribers.